have you noticed that your grocery bill is stubbornly still very high? If that is you, you are definitely not alone. I feel that too. And I know a lot of other people feel that. And so today we're actually going to take a look at the economic factors that are going into why your grocery bills are still high. Why do things still cost so much? And we are going to try to keep this apolitical. We're not going to get into who's doing the right thing and not, but I'm trying to be as truthful as possible as well, because I do have this theory. And if you are not new here, you know this, that I feel like the media, we usually talk about the financial media, but the media in general tend to pick and choose what they want to say about things and, want to say everything that this administration is doing is wonderful or is horrible. And that's not true. Okay. There's definitely little pieces here and there that are true and are helping and pieces that are not helping, right? A lot of people right now are still talking about trade and is that hurting our economy? And knowing these basics of how economics work for the goods that you are buying, including your groceries, will help you determine for yourself how you feel the Trump administration is doing. So I don't need to tell you about it. You can figure it out yourself. So this is not going to be a political video. I apologize ahead of time if you get triggered or upset about anything that I say. Is not intentional, but maybe that's something you need to look into because these are all just going to be facts about how the economy works. So that probably doesn't sound interesting to you, but if that sounds like something that you have felt this nagging feeling in the back of your head going, I just don't understand this stuff and I want to, this is a place to be for the next 15 minutes or so, just because we are going to be talking in plain language. There is not going to be any financialese or financial language that is not going to be understandable to you. I try to keep this very common sense, understanding, high level. We're not going to get into basics of like really detailed things, but I do think that it's really important to just go back to basics on how the economy works when it comes to our cost of goods that we're buying, including groceries, right? Toys, all that stuff. And I think that there's a demand for it. I have a short video out talking about the president of Hasbro and how, he is talking about how if we made toys here, it would be 50% higher. And he doesn't really go into too much about why that is. But that got a lot of views, which makes me think that you guys want somebody to explain this to you, that you are concerned about this. And if you just had the facts, you could make your own decisions. So if that part sounds good to you, stick around. We will take care of that in just a second. If you are new here, I just want to introduce myself. I'm Lisa. I've been a financial advisor for almost 15 years, and I help people get to financial freedom as quickly as possible. And I like to educate people and I like to help them figure out things for themselves as well. Okay, so we're going to jump into the first thing. Oh, and I always say this, I'm looking at my notes if you're wondering what I'm looking at. So just so you know. So let's talk about the first thing, which is supply and demand. So NetSuite had a really good definition that I thought was worth quoting on here. Supply is the amount of specific good or services that available. Let's start that over because that's not coming out correctly. Okay. Supply is the amount of a specific good or service that's available in the market. Demand is the amount of the good or service that the customer wants to buy it at. Supply and demand are both influenced by the price of goods and services. Okay. So you're saying now, you just told me you weren't going to talk in a language I don't understand, and I don't understand that. Okay. So basically, supply is the amount of, let's say, I don't know, let's say an apple. I always use an apple for some reason. Supply is the amount of an apple that's available in the market. And demand is the amount that people are willing to pay for that apple. So is it $1? Is it $2? Is it $3? What is the demand? What is the amount that people are willing to pay for that? And supply and demand together are both the influence of the price and the goods and services. Okay. So how do they work together? Well, they interact to make the pricing. Okay. So supply and demand are both part of how that apple comes to the $1.50 that it costs. It's silly. I buy apples every week. I have no idea what an apple costs. Um, but let's say $1.50. Just shows I'm not paying attention. It's not good. So basically, they can shift and have curves so there can be an increase in demand and a decrease in supply, or increase in supply and a decrease in demand. And those moving parts can change the price of the apple that we're talking about. So if demand for a certain thing like an apple is high, the supply or the supply is lowered, the price can stay pretty high. So basically, if the demand is high, the price stays high. And we'll get into that, why that is in a second. And if supply is lowered, meaning there's not as much of it out there, then the price can also stay high. And we're seeing that a lot with eggs right now. And we'll get into that in a second. So what are things that could make that supply and demand move? Well, global events. So people might say trade, the trade deals that are going on right now. We're filming this in April of 2025. So that's a big news story right now. Severe weather can be a bad problem. And disease, affecting crops and livestock, or, just issues I remember when there were issues with the port in Los Angeles. A lot of business owners I've worked with were having problems getting their stuff in, so they had to raise the price of their end product to be able to take care of that while they were waiting for their inventory to come in. So, essentially, you can kind of see how that works, is that if you don't have the inventory, because let's say it's stuck at the port of Los Angeles, then you're going to have to raise your price. And I'm talking you as the owner, as the business owner, right? We're going to have to raise your price of what you do have to try to offset the fact that you don't have anything. Now, once that supply chain comes in, if we're actually working in just basic economics, you should lower your price of said apple to make up, because now you've got a lot more of your supply. If the demand is really high, let's say, you have no problems and all the apples are coming in. I'm not sure why they would be coming into the port, but we're still going to use this. So coming into the port of Los Angeles, you've got so many apples and you're fine in terms of inventory, but people are like, I love these apples. These are amazing. These are Fuji apples or whatever they are. I don't know. And you see that you're running out of supply very quickly. As a business owner, you're going to say, well, I'm going to raise my price a little bit, because there's two factors that can go into that. A, you can, because people are willing to pay it. But B, you kind of want to slow the sale. I know that seems counterintuitive, but business owners will understand this, that have products like that. Kind of want to slow the sale, because you cannot keep up with that. You need people to stop buying quite as much of that apple so that you can get your supplies in order. Because if you run out of supplies, you don't have anything to sell. So there's kind of two factors that will go into that. Also, if you're keeping up with a huge demand of pricing of your apples that are coming out, that actually increases your cost, because you're having to do a lot more. And people will argue, well, if you have more, then maybe it lowers your cost. It depends on the product. It depends on a lot of things. I would say for manufacturing, yes, if you can get more widgets done within a certain period of time and be able to go to a supplier and say, this piece that goes into my widget, I'm ordering so much more, so therefore I want a better price on it. There's different things like that, but let's just keep it simple with the apple situation, okay? So there is a chain of reaction. So basically, there are lots of things that go into the price of your apple. And like I said, we're keeping it simple because we can definitely go into, you know, toys and things like that, and they're going to have different prices too. But the basic things that go into it are your raw materials, right? Your seeds, your fertilizer, your feed, whatever it is that goes into your thing. Obviously, this would be seeds and fertilizer and all that stuff for your apples. Your labor cost, right? So you need people to go get the apples, to take care of the apples as they're going. So you have labor, you have people who put the apples in the boxes. Those are probably different people than are picking the apples. So you've got labor costs. And I hate to say this, people don't like hearing it, but the business owner deserves an income too. They're part of this process as well. So they're going to have costs for themselves. You've got transportation. So to get it from point A to point B is a cost, right? You've got transportation costs to maybe if you have a distributor taking the apples, you send it to the distributor and then the distributor has to get it out to the different grocery stores. Those are two different fuel costs. There's transportation costs on that. So it's fuel prices are a big part of that. Packaging, obviously, like the crates that they're in, the cardboard box that you put them in, whatever it is, and to make sure that they stay good until they get to their destination. Because typically, we used to have it so go from farmer to grocery store. That's not it anymore, right? So it goes through a distributor or it goes through different. So it unfortunately takes a while for the apple coming from the farm to get to you at the grocery store. You've got lots of middleman people that add into that labor cost, and they all add these costs into their pricing because the farmer might sell it to the distributor at one price, but then the distributor needs to sell it to grocery store at said price. And then grocery store needs to make profit. So they're going to put another price on it. So there's a lot of different things that go into there. And packaging is one of those, right? Another thing is energy cost. So energy of, washing the apples or whatever those energy costs are that go, you've got maybe tractors or different. That's not really energy, but like lights on for people who are putting the apples in the boxes. I don't run an apple situation, so I don't sure exactly what the energy costs are, but they're energy costs. Now, those costs ripple through the supply chain. Okay. Essentially, this ripples through and affects the consumer's price. And you can see because we have so many layers of businesses involved with just this apple, let alone, if you're talking about a toy, right? But this is Apple, there's all these different people involved. They all are increasing their prices. That's what happened during inflation. And we're going to get to inflation in a second. But also, if they're able to bring down some of these key prices, like cardboard comes down in price, that will help all these different factors as well. And hopefully they will lower their prices. Again, will they for sure? Don't know, because if people are willing to buy it at this price, why would you lower it necessarily? It's might be, moral issue that people don't like that, but it's business, unfortunately. Okay. So if one cost goes down and the others remain high, they're not going to lower their prices either, because they're also going to be worried about different things that might be coming up. I do think that we are having a little bit of stagnation of bringing prices down, mainly because the trade stuff is unsure right now, and it is affecting, in particular, agriculture and livestock and stuff. So they're going to be hesitant to bring it down because they want to make sure that they cover themselves if for some reason trade does affect their sales outside the country. And if you're confused about how trade works, do have a trade video that's up as well, and you should go check that out. Okay. So inflation and its impact. Now, we all know about inflation. We've been talking about inflation since 2022. Now, just remember, it's a general increase in prices over time. Okay. So essentially, how much does your dollar go for? The reason high inflation is harmful to us, especially in the short term, but in the long term as well, of course, is, a price of an apple jumps up 50%, but our dollar is not growing at that same rate. So you've got things costing a lot more and your dollar doesn't buy as much, basically. And so it's a big problem of an overall economy in consumer spending, because if everything jumps up 50%, you're not just going to not buy the apple, you're not going to buy banana, and you're not going to buy cabbage, you're going to buy your basics that you absolutely need, right? Because your dollar is not growing at the same price as that. So it really does stop spending in the economy. Now, 2022 is interesting because it didn't seem to affect it as much. And I don't know why. And I think economists can't really explain why consumer spending didn't dip much more than it did. Was it fudging a number? I don't know. I have no idea why it didn't. I find that odd, but that's just my opinion. So essentially, inflation can lead to higher grocery prices, which is when we really started to see this jump in pricing, was around 2022 to 2023, right? Because of higher inflation. Well, business adjusts to rising costs, all those costs that we talked about, it pushes the prices up. And so essentially, you can have short-term spikes in prices and long-term inflationary pressures as well. And again, just because inflation comes down doesn't necessarily mean the pricing comes down, because other factors go into that as well. So it will be interesting to see how that all works itself out, and hopefully it will. Another thing that affects the costs of your apple or your grocery prices are a supply chain disruption and lag effects. So I already kind of talked about, clients back in, gosh, I don't even remember when this was. I don't know, maybe 2016. I don't know. I can't remember. But there were issues with the Port of Los Angeles. And people were having a hard time getting their stuff in. That is a supply chain disruption, because you don't have products, you don't have certain parts that you need, you don't have different things that go into your product for you to be able to sell. That is a disruption. There are these disruptions that happen all the time, either man-made, either some like economic factor that will go into it, some environmental issue that will go into it, global issues. We talked about all this stuff. So what do I mean by a lagging effect? Well, just because it happens now, it might not affect the pricing or the economy right away. It could affect it many, many years down the line. And some things that might be disrupting the supply chain right now that we're still not thinking about is things like the pandemic effect, right? It's lagging. That was back in 2020. This is 2025. And people are like, oh, that was 5 years ago. It's still having an effect on pricing. And we didn't really see it come into fruition probably until 2023. And some other parts still haven't come into it. Companies are still trying to make up for, a year or two of disruption. So that is adding to the price of things. The Ukraine war is Ukraine and Russia war, are having issues, particularly with wheat and corn markets. Ukraine is very big in that area, and there's a lot that goes into corn, that corn and wheat go into, and they were a big part of that. That was back in 2022. It's still going on now, but even if let's say it had only lasted a month, it still would be a lagging effect for supply and demand and supply chain, I should say. Another thing that, everybody's talking about the price of eggs going up. There was a bird flu that started in 2022, and that is having a lagging effect. And there were some things that were cut to try to bring down the price of eggs, and it has, at least I have seen some lowering of the cost of eggs from what they put in place. However, that was a lagging effect because the bird flu started in 2022, and we didn't really feel that until 2024, 2025. I would say late 2024, early 2025. So essentially, That's part of it. Now, the last part we've kind of already gone through a bit, so I'm going to kind of go quickly on this so that I don't make the video too long. But again, you play a role in this. Okay? If you are buying things at an incredibly high price that you could skip without, that is adding to that demand that people are not wanting to pay that price, but they are. So basically, the business owner takes that information in and says, well, they're willing to pay it, so I'll just keep my prices there. People don't like hearing that, but it's true. If you don't like the price of something and you don't need it to survive, don't buy it. I hate to say that, but don't buy it. A, it's better for your budget. But B, it is just adding into the producer or the business owner giving you the product to keep that price up because you're saying, okay, I'll buy it. So we are adding to the stickiness of those prices. And people are saying, well, Trump said he'd go and negotiate stuff and everything. Okay, but if the business owner comes to him and says they're willing to pay this price, it makes it a lot harder to negotiate anything, right? Should they do it out of the goodness of their heart? Of course they should. But it just is one of those things that if you don't need it and you don't like that price tag, maybe rethink, because you are basically saying a thumbs up to that business owner or that producer saying, yeah, I'm okay with paying that price. They don't hear you grumbling about the price on the way home. Also, sticky prices also are part of the fact that prices change slowly. All those different factors we talk about take time to bring prices down. So, I said this in another video. Everybody, there was about economic outcomes or outlook for 2025. Everybody believes that Trump was going to take office and man, those grocery prices were going to come down. It's just not how it works. It does take time for things to start to penetrate the market. So let's hope that it moves along a little quicker and that we are able to see some of those prices coming down. But they are sticky prices for a reason. And yeah, I think that's a good place to stay at. So just remember, there's a lot of different factors that go into the pricing of our goods, our groceries, those kind of things. If you don't like the price of it, maybe you should sit there and say, I'm not going to buy it. I'm just not going to buy it. And everybody goes, well, it's just one person. But if everybody does that, then people are going to say, I can't charge that much for this apple. I need to bring the price down to get people to come back and buy it. And so that will push that along. Is that nice to a business owner that might not be taking advantage of you, that might be, just trying to survive? No, but at the same time, maybe that will push them to do business a different way, meaning, use this instead of this, or cut this distributor in it out, or whatever it is. It might push them to do something a little different so that they can keep their prices down for the long term. So, you have to do what's right for you. You can't control other people, but just keep that in mind when you're at the grocery store and you pick up an apple and you don't like the price of it and it's not an absolute necessity in your home, maybe put it back. And that might help the prices go down a little faster. So, and I like ending on things that you can control, and that is one thing you can control. So with that, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope this gave you an understanding of how basic economics work with the supply and demand, how inflation works on everything, and what some of the costs are that are going into your products and into your groceries. And just stay strong out there. I know it's difficult. I know that there's a lot of information coming at you, but just remember the basics. Remember, control what you can control and kind of just push off everything else because there's nothing you can do about it, unfortunately. And with that, take care. Hope things are going well. I was going to say stay strong again, but that, just hope everything is going well and that we will see you on the next video. Bye-bye.